So here's something curious for you to ponder. I am talking about speech and the power of words today, and I'm losing my voice. Very interesting. Very
God
interesting.
works in
Mysterious ways, that's right. So as we know, Judaism is intensely aware of the power of speech. It's about the God who cannot be seen. He can only be heard, and God who created the universe with words. God reveals himself in words. He spoke to the patriarchs and the prophets, and at Mount Sinai to the nation. Our very humanity has to do with our ability to use language. And the laws that are most difficult to keep and that we most often violate easily surround speech. So during these high holy days when we're reciting the Al-Chet, and 11 of the sins are regarding speech, we can take a little time today to really focus on our words and the power of our words. It's a very important area of Jewish law, and you may have heard the metaphor, the analogy to an arrow. So when you shoot an arrow, words are like that. You can't get them back. And many times they veer off path and have unintended consequences. So this afternoon, I'd like to talk about 4 things when we discuss speech. I've got a reference sheet at each of your tables, the yellow sheet. I want to talk about who's harmed when we gossip, when and if white lies are permitted, and hopefully we'll get to the concept of Lashon Tov, or good speech. So if you'll turn to those yellow sheets, the first one we have is what I made reference to, God creating the universe through speech. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light in Genesis. And then I have a passage from Numbers, and Miriam speaking about Moses, right? She made reference to his wife. And although her statement was accurate, we questioned her intentions, and God certainly did. And he was angry with Miriam, not only for, what is it that we call gossip in Hebrew, Lashon Hara. He was angry with Miriam, so much so that he gave her leprosy. So the Torah is giving a very strong message about the power of words. And then in Leviticus, can someone read the third portion here? Someone? Thank you, yes. So in Leviticus, we see the express prohibition against tale-bearing. And in Hebrew, we say rechilut. My Hebrew's a little bit not so good right now with my throat this way. So Rabbi Khan will correct me. My gutturals aren't as good today. And then the next one is so beautiful from Proverbs. Can someone read that one for us? Yes, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it shall eat its fruit, which is just beautiful. The Talmud tells us that the tongue is an instrument that can be so dangerous that it has to be kept hidden from view behind 2 protective walls, right? The mouth and the teeth. And let's talk about a scenario about who's harmed by gossip. So let's say next week we're in shul for the high holy days, and our friend Saul comes up to us and he says, you know, did you hear about Max? He lost a lot of money in the stock market last week. So in that scenario, tell us who's harmed? Is anyone harmed? And if so, who is it? So the person who's being spoken about, right? Who isn't present? Anyone else?
The person who's speaking it brings you kind of down a level.
The person who's speaking it, because there's a prohibition against Lashon Hara.
And anyone else that heard it.
And the person who hears it, right? The person who listens to gossip, we're told, is even worse than the person who tells it, because no harm could have been done, and no harm can be done if we don't listen to the gossip. The Talmud teaches us that when we speak poorly about others, it not only harms the person spoken about, but it also harms the speaker and the listener. What about white lies? What happens? Think about this. Your friend comes up to you. She's got the most horrendous dress you've ever seen on. It's really bad. The color, the print, it's ill-fitting. And she says, Sally, what do you think of my new dress?
I love it.
Yeah, one answer is, I love it. What else? Any other ideas? What would you say?
My mother used to say, well, that's interesting. Or that's different. So then you don't know what's that.
Right. So, well, that's interesting. That's a good one. Pardon? It goes with your shoes. That's a good one. I like that
Well, if
one.
the person is in a situation that they can't change it, and they're
Yeah.
already at their whatever event, it's going to hurt them more to tell them the truth, and that
Okay.
would be worse.
So Jackie said, if the situation is such that maybe there's nothing, they're at an event and there's nothing this woman could do, she couldn't go change her dress, then maybe you'd say something positive. Yeah. So situation, we'll talk about that. On your source sheet, I included some quotes, some verses from the Talmud. As you can imagine, of course, the Talmud addresses white lies. And in one particular situation, they give us the example of the bride. And Shammai is debating with Hillel. And Shammai says, when you see a bride, if she's not beautiful, you can't say that she's beautiful. And he's our strict constructionist, right? But Hillel comes along and he says, beautiful and graceful bride. Every bride has to be regarded and praised as beautiful and graceful. And so Shammai, of course, comes back, because that's what we do. We respond, we keep going. And Shammai said to Hillel, well, what if she was lame and blind? Does one say of her, beautiful and graceful bride? Because in the Torah, and I've included this on your source sheet, it says, keep thee from false matter. We're supposed to tell the truth. And Hillel goes on with an example of purchases and being at the market, and ultimately he says, and this is a good out for us, he says, in the eyes of the groom, his bride is beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So what are the differences? What are the differences between Hillel's position and Shammai's position? What do you think? Or what do you agree with?
We have no relationship with.
Right, and we're going to address that. Those are good points about the relationship. You know, it depends on the relationship, she was saying, and the situation and the motivation. So you think, you agree with Hillel and going beyond the strict reading of the text? Yeah. So he said there is a Yiddish expression that all brides are beautiful. So, and I would agree with that. Is it necessary to always tell the truth?
No.
What do you think? Because you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So is it always necessary to tell the truth? And we had some responses about tact and feelings, and it's not necessarily black and white, is what I'm hearing. So what's really at stake here is not just temperament, is what I'm hearing from you, not just, the puritanical Shammai, House of Shammai versus a little bit softer, a little bit more well-rounded, the Hillel group. It's two views about the nature of language. Shammai thinks that language is a way of making statements, which they're either true or false. And Hillel says it's more than making statements. We can use language to encourage, to motivate, to inspire, and the flip side, of course, is we can harm and depress and discourage. So language does more than convey information. Like we know it conveys emotion and it creates a mood or can disrupt a mood. The sensitive use of speech involves social and emotional intelligence, which is what all of you were saying. And if it's a sin to speak badly about people, what about the converse? What about speaking well of someone? In Talmud, in Mishnah Avot, there's an example where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 disciples. And the rabbi was very good about praising them. He said, one of them is like a plastered well that never loses a drop. That's quite a compliment, isn't it? And he says, happy the one who gave him birth, an ever-flowing spring. So he was always good about praising his disciples. If you look at that example, it seems to contradict the Talmudic principle that let no one ever talk in praise of his neighbor, for praise will lead to criticism. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, of course, we have 2 more sages talking about the meaning of this, Rashi and Rambam. Rashi says, having delivered excessive praise, or yoter midai, the crucial consideration is, do you ask yourself, is the praise judicious? Is it accurate and true? Or is it overstated? If the former, it's fine, it's permitted. If the latter, it's forbidden. Rambam comes back and he says, he sees it differently. He writes, whoever speaks well about his neighbor in the presence of his enemies is guilty of a secondary form of evil speech, avak lashon hara, since the comment will provoke them to speak badly about that person. According to Rambam, the issue isn't whether the praise is moderate or excessive, it's the context, which Jackie was referring to earlier. If it's done in the presence of friends, of the person about whom you're speaking, it's permitted. And it's only forbidden when you're speaking in the company of enemies and detractors of that person, because it becomes a provocation with bad consequences. So what do you think of this? Good, yeah. Well, I as we were talking about earlier, I think the concept is, in my mind, yes. Yes, that's a good way of dealing with it. But remember what we were talking about earlier, which is you shouldn't even listen to it. So in that case, that would be your response then, is to come back with something positive about that person? Yeah? Well, okay.
Well, what, in this situation then, you may not always know if a person likes someone or doesn't like someone.
That's true. That's a good point. So if you didn't hear, she said, well, you don't necessarily know, right? I may walk up to a rabbi and say, Rabbi Khan is awesome, which he is, right?
No.
But the other rabbi may be envious. Who knows what their past is? Maybe they went to school together, and the other rabbi doesn't like him. You're right. You don't necessarily know. So that would be stifling, right? If we look at that strictly. What other thoughts on these 2 views? It's the context versus.
But there's one other thought, is if you said something nice about it versus somebody saying something negative.
Right, and I think I totally agree, but it's also about being careful with what we say, no matter what, because we don't know, as you said, how this person feels about Rabbi Khan. So always consider what's coming out of your mouth because of the consequences, right? Like shooting the arrow. Yeah.
But you are actually obligated to point out a lie. So if someone says something that is a lie, then you must correct them. You must say that is a lie.
Oh, good, okay.
Okay? So not, that is a very blurry area. And Paulina, did you talk about Lashon HaTov?
That's what we're talking about right now.
Right, so Lashon Tov is about praise more than it is about reaction or response, right? But if someone says something that's a lie, you're obligated to say that is not true.
Even if it's praise.
Even if what?
Even if it's praise. If somebody praises,
Even if it, no, that's trickier, but even if it's praise, then you're engaging in Lashon Hara. So that is in the same category as a white lie, which is, the white lie is just keep it to yourself at that point. It's very tricky, especially for those of us who have gone through, for example, you leave one company to go to another company, right? So you've got all these colleagues, and let's say it's a very amicable split, and they had a nice party for you, and people wrote in your little gift, and right?
Yeah.
So we've all done that, and we have to be very careful about when the person's not around, especially, how we tell the story about why they left. And it's okay to say to someone that's not true, that is not the real reason. And if it is true, the gossip, then what Paulina said before is you're supposed to walk away. You're not supposed to engage. Engagement is the key, because you don't know the intention, you don't know the unconscious, you don't know all that other stuff that goes on in human relationships, So you're supposed to walk away.
And be careful. I
And
mean,
be
the
very
Talmud
careful.
also goes on to talk about secrets. And we're just not supposed to divulge a secret. There's an example of a student who tells a secret that had occurred, something that had occurred 22 years prior. And once he said it, he was kicked out of the yeshiva. So secrets and being very aware of what we're saying, even if it had already occurred or it was 22 years in the past. Go ahead. So what we know, you're not supposed to say bad things about people, right? And then there's the debate about good things. Rashi says, is it true? He goes through his litany of tests to see if you should say it. And Rambam says, no, that's not what it is. It's about who the audience is. So it's trickier, like Rabbi Khan said, with the Lashon Tov than it is with the Lashon Hara. I think that's a little bit easier to spot when someone's saying something bad.
And I would just think,
If I feel
Yeah,
one
but
thing
that's
for
to
another
me.
person,
Yeah. So she was saying, for example, if someone wins an award, aren't we able to go and praise them and compliment them, right? Yes, absolutely. I think this situation is more about who the audience is and being careful, because you don't know if it's a friend or an enemy. That's Rambam's point.
You can praise someone and say,
Of course.
that you love them or whatever.
Yeah, I would say
That's preferable.
absolutely, yes.
can you do,
As a personally,
Yeah.
to stop yourself.
Yeah, but not make it a negative rumor or gossip.
Yeah, I
There's
think,
tools for that.
I think that's part of the human process, right? Is developing and growing and coming in on the high holy days and admitting, when we've spoken badly about someone and attempting to do better the next year, right? Is to make those statements a little bit less and go through that personal growth and ability of when you shouldn't say it, recognizing when you shouldn't say it.
I have an idea. Well, going with your theme, what if you were just to say, gee, even weigh it? Because how many people have been ruined by somebody saying something that wasn't true, and no one weighed it and said, I know this person, this is not true for this person.
Right.
And even weigh it and say, well, is this true or is this envy or
Yeah.
gossip?
So
Or-
that's
and weigh it,
mhm.
and then if you weigh it, you may not be inclined to say it.
And so that's
If it's not true, or, it may not be true. What if
well,
what
and
if somebody just made it up?
yeah, and that's what we were talking about when the Talmud says the listener is even more guiltier than the person who said it, because it's our responsibility to speak up or say something or walk away, right? So much good discussion, Gail, and then, yeah.
So should Lashon Hara be expanded to even not being in physical presence of someone, like, on Lashon Hara?
Oh, absolutely.
Just, I think even worse, because you're not in physical presence and you're
Yes.
sort of divorced from that interaction because
Yes.
you're behind a screen or on
Right.
a phone and you don't have to deal with the
Social media, absolutely, right? That's one of the problems Gail brought up, is you're not face to face. It's easier.
But shouldn't it?
It's easier.
Even if you're not.
Absolutely. And so you've just given me the topic for our session next time, which is cyberbullying. What does the Talmud say about cyberbullying?
I know.
Yeah.
It's just,
Not a big
Yeah,
fan.
no, but you're right. You're right. And those are the reasons why social media can be so dangerous, right? We hear the stories, we read about them in the newspaper, people committing suicide
Right.
because of the power of our words. So we're at the end of our time, but I want to leave you with, and hopefully this gave you some good food for thought. And I want to leave you with a quote from the very eloquent Jonathan Sacks, who actually, I got a text while I was sitting here from a friend, and he said, Jonathan Sacks has a piece in the Wall Street Journal about the High Holy Days and Viktor Frankl, and he's using Viktor Frankl's message. So Jonathan brought it all together for us. That was very nice today. He said, words create, words reveal, words command, words redeem. Judaism is a religion of holy words. For words are the narrow bridge across the abyss between soul and soul, between two human beings, and between humanity and God. Language is the redemption of solitude and the mender of broken relationships. Beautiful. So thank you.